My name is Nicole Morgan. I'm 28 years old. For as long as I can remember, my parents called me the disappointment, while my younger sister, Charlotte, collected Ivy League degrees and promises of inheriting everything my family owned. They laughed at my dyslexia at dinner, shut me out of every important decision, and paid me less than half of what they gave her because, in their words, I wasn't worth investing in. But on Charlotte's graduation night, at the Grand Regent Hotel, in front of more than 300 guests, my father stood on stage and publicly cut me out of the family forever. And just minutes later, a stranger walked up to me and handed me an envelope that would expose every lie my parents had built their lives on. What they didn't know was that my grandmother had been watching everything all along. And before she died, she left me something powerful enough to destroy the entire Morgan empire. Before we go any further, take a moment to subscribe, but only if you believe in knowing your true worth, even when others don't see it. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what the temperature is like there right now. It makes this feel a little more real, a little more connected. Just a quick note, this is a fictional story, with some elements enhanced by AI to make it more vivid and emotionally powerful. Now, let me take you back and tell you how it all really began. The Morgans were the kind of old money family people whispered about in quiet admiration, the kind whose name was etched into hospital wings, museum galleries, and university halls across Chicago. My father, Richard Morgan, ran Morgan Holdings, a commercial real estate empire my grandmother, Eleanor Morgan, had built from a single office on the South Side back in 1965. By 2024, the company was worth over $90 million, and every inch of it carried her legacy. I was born with dyslexia, diagnosed at 7. Letters didn't just sit still on the page for me. They moved, twisted, rearranged themselves into something unfamiliar. What should have been simple felt like solving a puzzle that kept changing shape. It took me 3 times longer to read anything, and even then, I wasn't always sure I got it right. My parents didn't see it as something to support. To them, it was something to be embarrassed about. When I was 12, they hired private tutors for Charlotte, violin lessons at a prestigious conservatory, advanced language programs, SAT prep with a tutor who charged more per hour than most people made in a day. They invested in her like she was their future. When I asked if I could get help with reading, my mother, Victoria, barely looked up from her phone. Nicole, we've already spent so much on specialists. At some point, we have to accept that not every child is meant to excel academically. I was 12 years old, and I believed her. So I stopped asking. I found my own way instead. Audiobooks became my escape. I started building systems in my head, turning information into visual maps, diagrams, patterns that made sense to me even when words didn't. It wasn't traditional learning, but it worked. Every Sunday, I took the train downtown to my grandmother's apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. Those afternoons became the only place I felt seen. She never rushed me, never sighed when I struggled. Instead, she explained things through stories, through connections, through meaning. Nicole, she told me once, placing her hand gently over mine, you may read slower than others, but you see what they don't. That's not a weakness. That's a different kind of strength. I didn't fully understand her then. Not yet. because before I could see what she saw in me, I had to survive years of being treated like the family's quiet disappointment. Christmas in 2018 made that painfully clear. 20 relatives gathered around the long dining table in my parents' downtown penthouse. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, casting soft light across polished silverware and expensive wine glasses. Everything looked perfect, like a scene from a magazine. My father stood at the head of the table, raising his glass. "I have an announcement," he said, his voice calm, controlled, the same tone he used in boardrooms. "Charlotte has been accepted into Yale Law School. Full scholarship." The room erupted in applause, smiles, cheers. My sister lowered her gaze modestly, playing her part perfectly. "My daughter." My father continued, pride radiating from every word. "Will take this family and this company to even greater heights." More applause followed, louder this time. Then his eyes shifted. To me and Nicole. He paused, just long enough for the room to quiet. "Well, Nicole is also here." A few people laughed, soft, awkward laughter that stung more than silence ever could. Charlotte didn't say a word. She smiled, and then she laughed with them. I stared down at my plate, blinking back tears that threatened to fall. The food in front of me blurred, my chest tightening with something I couldn't name at the time. Under the table, a hand found mine. My grandmother. Her fingers were thin, her skin fragile, but her grip was steady. When I looked up, her eyes weren't soft or comforting. They were sharp, furious. Not at me, at them. She didn't say anything that night. Not in front of everyone. But 3 months later, she called me to her apartment and told me she had something important to show me. I didn't realize it then. But that moment at the dinner table, that quiet humiliation in front of people who were supposed to be my family, had already set something into motion, something that would take years to unfold. And when it finally did, nothing about the Morgan family would ever be the same again. March 2019. My grandmother Eleanor's apartment. She was 82 then. Time had thinned her frame, softened her once commanding presence into something more fragile. But her eyes hadn't changed. They were still sharp, still observant, still seeing more than anyone else in the room ever realized. "Sit down, Nicole." I sat across from her in the same living room where I had spent countless Sunday afternoons. The space felt unchanged, filled with quiet history. The walls were covered in photographs. My grandmother breaking ground on her first Chicago property in 1965. My grandmother shaking hands with city officials. My grandmother receiving awards. Standing confidently in rooms where she clearly belonged. There was something else I noticed. Not a single photo of my father leading anything. "I built Morgan Holdings from nothing," she said, her voice steady despite her age. "One office, one assistant, 60 years of work." She paused, her expression tightening slightly. "Your father inherited it. He didn't build it. And he doesn't understand what it means to create something from the ground up." I hesitated before speaking. "He judges people by their degrees, their titles, how they perform in meetings." She leaned forward, her gaze locking onto mine. "I judge people by how they treat those who can't defend themselves." Her words settled heavily in the room. "And you," she continued more softly, are the only one in this family who knows how to be kind." I didn't know what to say to that. She reached beside her chair and picked up a small wooden box. Mahogany. Polished. With brass hinges that caught the light. She placed it into my hands. Her grip surprisingly firm. "There's something inside that may help you one day," she said. "But not yet." I frowned slightly. "What is it?" "You're not ready yet," she replied. "And neither is your father." Her fingers tightened around mine for a brief moment. "When the time comes, when he shows you exactly who he is, you'll understand what to do." I wanted to ask more. I wanted to know what she meant, why she had chosen me, what could possibly be inside something she treated with such importance. But just as quickly as the moment had deepened, she shifted the conversation. She asked about my apartment, my job, the weather, a book she had been reading. Like the weight of her words had never existed. 18 months later, she was gone. Pancreatic cancer. I sat beside her in hospice, holding her hand as the machines around us hummed softly. I was the only one there. No board members, no business partners, no family gathering to say goodbye. Just me. After she passed, I took the box home and placed it in my closet. I never opened it. Not because I forgot about it, but because something inside me told me she meant what she said. I would know when the time was right. April 2024. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while I was sitting at my desk in the administrative department. Subject line: position restructuring confidential. I opened it once, then again, then a third time. The words refused to stay still, shifting slightly as I read. But the meaning didn't change. My position was being eliminated. Effective July 1st. HR would contact me about severance. They were firing me. That evening, I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I didn't know where else to go. I organized files no one would ever need, stacked papers that would probably be thrown out within weeks. Through the thin wall beside my cubicle, I heard voices, my father and my mother. "We can't have her here when Charlotte takes over," my father said. His tone was calm, calculated. "It looks bad. The CEO's sister working as a secretary." He continued, "People will ask questions." "What kind of questions?" my mother asked. A pause. Why she's not in leadership. Why we haven't promoted her. Why she is the way she is. Silence hung for a moment before my mother spoke again. Her voice quieter, almost gentle. "We've done everything we could for her, Richard. Some children just don't have what it takes." "Exactly," he replied. "So she needs to go." My hand pressed flat against the wall as if I could somehow push through it and stop the words from continuing. "We'll give her a decent severance," he added. "She can find something else. Something more appropriate for her abilities." I stepped back slowly, my chest tightening. $42,000 a year. My small apartment on the outskirts of the city, shared with 2 roommates, cost nearly half of that in rent alone. I had no savings, no backup plan. If I lost this job, I would have nothing within 2 months. But it wasn't the money that made it hard to breathe. It was the realization settling in. If I let this happen, if I accepted their version of me, I would spend the rest of my life believing it. Not because it was true, but because I had never been given the chance to prove otherwise. Charlotte's graduation party was the next night, and, for the first time, I found myself wondering what else my father had planned to take from me. The ballroom felt too large, too polished, like it had been built for people who belonged there, not for someone like me. I sat at a table near the back, half hidden behind a pillar, surrounded by distant relatives I barely knew. From my seat, I could see the stage clearly. A massive portrait of Charlotte in her Yale graduation robe hung behind it, along with a banner celebrating her success. Congratulations, Charlotte Morgan, Yale Law Class of 2024. Everything around me was flawless. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across silk tablecloths. A live orchestra played softly. Guests laughed, toasted, admired. And near the entrance stood a man I had never seen before. Silver hair, gray suit. Still, he wasn't speaking to anyone. He wasn't eating. He was just watching. At one point, his eyes met mine, and something about it made my chest tighten. Not fear, just a strange sense that he knew something I didn't. At exactly 8:30 p.m., the music stopped, the lights dimmed. A spotlight landed on the stage where my father stood, champagne glass in hand. The room fell silent instantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and confident. "Thank you for being here tonight to celebrate an extraordinary young woman." Applause broke out. Charlotte graduated in the top 5% of her class at Yale Law. She completed a prestigious clerkship. And just last month, she was placed on partner track at one of the most competitive firms in the country. The applause grew louder. Charlotte stepped onto the stage beside him, glowing in a designer gown, smiling just enough to appear modest. My father looked at her like she was everything he had ever hoped for. "But tonight," he continued, "we are not just celebrating her achievements." He paused. "We are announcing her future." The room quieted again, effective immediately. "Charlotte Morgan will inherit my entire estate upon my passing." A murmur spread through the crowd. "This includes our primary residence, valued at over $12 million. And most importantly," he let the silence stretch, "the position of CEO of Morgan Holdings." The room erupted. People stood, applauding, cheering. Cameras flashed. Voices overlapped with admiration. 300 people celebrating a future that didn't include me. At my table, a distant cousin leaned closer. "Nicole." "Right. So, what does that mean for you?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. What could I possibly say? That I had just been erased from my own family, that the email waiting in my inbox had already sealed my fate, that every doubt they had ever planted in me had just been confirmed in front of everyone who mattered on stage. Charlotte hugged our father while cameras captured the moment. No one looked toward the back of the room. No one noticed me. If you think my father was right to publicly cut me out of the family and hand everything to my sister, then comment fair. But if you believe no one deserves to be humiliated, erased, and treated like they don't matter, then comment so unfair. Sometimes the people closest to us hurt us the most, and your voice might matter more than you think. Back in that room, there was still someone watching me, the man by the door. He began walking toward me, slow and deliberate, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. He stopped beside my table, up close. He looked older than I thought, maybe in his early 60s. His posture was precise, his expression controlled. "Miss Morgan," I straightened slightly. Yes, my name is Daniel Whitaker. He handed me a business card, thick paper, embossed lettering, Whitaker and Cole, attorneys at law. I was your grandmother's attorney. The words hit harder than I expected. My grandmother passed away 3 years ago. I said, I'm aware. His tone remained calm. She left something for you, he continued, with very specific instructions about when to deliver it. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, cream-colored, heavy, sealed with red wax. I hesitated before taking it. What is this? I asked. He met my eyes. Her will, he said quietly, the real one. My heartbeat quickened. I looked down at the seal. The date was clear, September 12th, 2019, 5 months after that afternoon in her apartment. I don't understand, I said. Your grandmother was very clear. He replied, I was to deliver this on the day your father publicly disinherited you. Behind him. Applause still echoed from the stage. I believe, he added, glancing briefly toward it. That moment just happened. My hands trembled slightly. What's inside? I asked. For the first time, his expression softened just a little. She told me to say this. He said, give it to Nicole when Richard shows her exactly who he is. He paused. She believed that by then, you would be ready. He adjusted his jacket. If you have questions, my number is on the card. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. The noise of the ballroom rushed back in. Overwhelming. I couldn't stay there. I stood up and made my way toward the service exit, pushing through the doors into a quiet hallway. The music faded into a distant hum. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I leaned against the wall, staring down at the envelope in my hands. For a moment, I just held it. Then, slowly, with shaking fingers, I broke the seal. At the bottom of the document, one paragraph stopped me cold. To activate this bequest, Nicole Morgan must formally request an emergency board meeting within 72 hours of receiving this document. Failure to act within this window will render this will null and void. 72 hours. I did the math automatically. The deadline would be 8:30 p.m. on May 18th. My back pressed against the cold hallway wall as I held the papers tightly against my chest. My grandmother hadn't just left me an inheritance. She had left me a decision, a weapon. And now I had to decide if I was brave enough to use it. When I stepped back into the ballroom, Daniel Whitaker was waiting near the coat check, exactly where I had left him. You read it, he said. The 72-hour clause, I replied, my voice unsteady. Why would she do that? He handed me another card, this one with a handwritten number on the back. Because she knew you, he said. She knew that if you had unlimited time, you might talk yourself out of it. I looked down at the number, then back at him. The deadline isn't a punishment, he continued. It's permission. Permission to stop waiting for your family to finally choose you, and to choose yourself instead. He checked his watch briefly. You have 3 days, if you want to move forward. You'll need to formally request an emergency board meeting. I can help you prepare everything. Through the ballroom doors, I could still see my father on stage, smiling for photos beside Charlotte. My mother moved gracefully through the crowd, accepting congratulations like she had earned them herself. If I did this, everything would change. There would be no going back. My parents would never forgive me. Charlotte would see it as betrayal. Every fragile connection I still had would shatter. But if I stayed silent, then they were right about me. I would become exactly what they had always said I was: invisible, replaceable, nothing. Nicole. His voice pulled me back. Your grandmother believed in you, he said quietly. She spent years preparing for this moment. He held my gaze. The only question is, do you believe in yourself? I looked down at the will again, at the signature of the woman who had sat beside me when no one else did. The woman who had seen something in me I had never fully understood. I took a breath. I'll call you tomorrow, I said. We're requesting that meeting. For the first time. He smiled slightly. She said you would. That night, back in my small apartment, I finally took the wooden box out of my closet. My roommates were asleep. The only light came from the street lamp outside, casting faint shadows across my bed. I sat there, the box resting in my lap, feeling the weight of everything it might contain. When I opened it, the hinges creaked softly. Inside, there were 3 things: a handwritten letter, an old document, yellowed with age, stamped with a date from 1965, and a USB drive. I reached for the letter first. My dearest Nicole, if you're reading this, then Daniel has done his job, and your father has done exactly what I feared he would. My throat tightened as I continued reading. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you while I was alive, but I can protect you now. I unfolded the older document next. It was the original partnership agreement from when my grandmother founded Morgan Holdings. According to it, the founding shares carried permanent voting rights. They couldn't be reduced or transferred without board approval, something my father had clearly never seen. Then I plugged in the USB. A single file appeared. Board meeting minutes, March 2018. I opened it. Inside was documented proof that my father had once tried to reduce my grandmother's voting power from 51% to just 10%. His official reasoning claimed she was no longer capable, but the truth was obvious. He wanted control, and she had stood in his way. The vote had failed, but she hadn't forgotten, and she hadn't forgiven him. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. This wasn't just evidence, it was leverage. The next morning, I made a call. Margaret Lawson answered on the second ring. Nicole Morgan, she said, her voice rough but warm. I've been expecting you. You know who I am? I asked. Your grandmother and I built half this company together. She replied. She talked about you more than you think. There was a brief pause. She also told me about the will. Margaret added, 3 years ago. I tightened my grip on the phone. Then you know what I'm about to do. I know what you're considering, she said calmly. And that's not the same thing. Margaret's tone shifted. Sharper now. More direct. You want to call an emergency board meeting, she said. That requires 3 board members to sign. I'm one. You'll need 2 more. Can you help me find them? I asked. A brief pause. Then the sound of papers moving on her end. I can do better than that, she replied. Your father isn't as respected as he thinks. His leadership style, let's just say it's created tension. At least a few board members have concerns. They just need someone to go first. Hope flickered inside me. Who? I asked. Thomas Green and Evelyn Park, she said. They've both had their share of disagreements with Richard behind closed doors. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I'll speak to them, she continued. But Nicole, you need to understand something. This won't be easy. Your father will fight. Your sister will fight. And they won't hold back. They never have, I said quietly. At least this time. I get to answer. She let out a small laugh. Warm and approving. Your grandmother always said you had strength beneath that quiet. She said, I'm starting to see it too. There was a pause. I'll have the petition ready tonight, she added. Board meeting scheduled for May 18th. 10 a.m., Morgan Tower. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet, she replied. Thank me when you walk into that room. The call ended, but something inside me had already shifted. The next afternoon, everything began to move faster. At exactly 4 p.m., my father found out. I didn't see it happen, but I felt it. 40 minutes later, my phone rang. Charlotte. Her voice was tight, controlled, but underneath it, I could hear the anger. What did you do? I sat at my desk, pretending to organize files. I don't know what you mean, I said. Dad just got a notice. She snapped. Emergency board meeting tomorrow. Requested by Margaret Lawson and 2 others. A pause. Sharp. Dangerous. Margaret hasn't requested anything in years. What did you do? Maybe she has concerns about how the company is being run, I said calmly. Stop playing games. Nicole, she said, her voice cracking slightly. If you're trying to embarrass us, I'm just doing my job, I replied. Same as always. Silence. Then the line went dead. 20 minutes later. My father stormed past my cubicle. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge me at all. He just walked straight into his office and slammed the door hard enough to make the walls vibrate. Through the thin wall, I could hear him on the phone. This is ridiculous, he said. A complete waste of time. Margaret's probably losing her mind. A pause. No, I'm not worried. He continued. Nicole. She can barely handle basic tasks. She's not a threat to anyone. I leaned back in my chair, a small smile forming before I could stop it. For the first time in my life, being underestimated felt like an advantage. That night, I prepared. I printed copies of the will, saved the documents onto my phone, wrote down exactly what I needed to say. No accusations, just facts. Daniel Whitaker confirmed he would be there. Around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Margaret. Petition filed. See you tomorrow. Your grandmother would be proud. I barely slept that night, but it wasn't fear keeping me awake. It was anticipation. The next morning, I stood in front of Morgan Tower, staring up at the glass building that had defined my family for decades. At 9:45 a.m., I stepped inside. The elevator carried me to the top floor. When the doors opened, everything felt different. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble floors, silence. The kind of place designed to remind you exactly where you stood. I adjusted the borrowed blazer I was wearing, 2 sizes too big, and tightened my grip on the worn leather folder in my hands. At the entrance to the boardroom, a security guard raised his hand. Name Nicole Morgan. He checked his tablet, then frowned. You're not on the authorized list. I'm here on company business, I said. I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't let you in. Is there a problem? Charlotte's voice came from behind me. I turned. She looked exactly like she belonged there. Tailored suit, perfect posture, absolute confidence. Nicole, she said, her smile thin. What are you doing here? I have something to present to the board. She let out a short laugh. About what you work in administration. The details are confidential. You don't even understand basic financial terms, she said. You shouldn't be anywhere near this room. Before I could respond, my father appeared at the end of the hallway. What's going on? Nicole thinks she's attending the meeting, Charlotte said. He looked at me the way he always did, like I didn't belong. Go back to your desk, he said coldly. This doesn't concern you? Actually, a voice interrupted from inside the room. It does. We all turned. Margaret Lawson stood in the doorway, calm, composed, completely in control. I invited her, she said. The hallway fell silent for a moment. No one moved. Then my father's expression hardened. Fine, he said. Let her in. His voice was cold. We'll see how long it takes before she embarrasses herself. The boardroom was smaller than I expected. A polished walnut table sat at the center, surrounded by 12 leather chairs. Portraits of past executives lined the walls. My grandmother's portrait hung above the fireplace, her painted eyes seeming to watch the room. 12 board members took their seats. My father sat at the head. Charlotte sat to his right, not officially on the board, but already placed like his successor. I was given a chair at the far end of the table, in the corner. Daniel Whitaker sat quietly with his briefcase. When our eyes met, he gave me a small nod. Edward Langford, the board chairman, called the meeting to order. This emergency session was requested by Margaret Lawson, Thomas Green, and Evelyn Park. He said, Margaret, you have the floor. Margaret stood. I'll be brief. A document has come to light that affects the ownership structure of this company. She turned toward me. I yield my time to Miss Nicole Morgan. Every eye in the room shifted in my direction. Charlotte smirked. My father leaned back in his chair, wearing the expression of a man already bored. I stood. Thank you, I said. What I'm about to present may surprise some of you. I ask only that you hear the evidence before deciding what to believe. Before I could continue, my father stood up. I'm sorry, he said smoothly. But before this goes any further, I need to provide some context. Nicole is my daughter, and I care about her. But she is not qualified to address this board on any serious business matter. He gestured toward me. She works in an administrative role. She has no legal training, no financial background, no strategic experience. Charlotte spoke next, her tone coated in false sympathy. And Nicole has dyslexia. Reading complex material has always been difficult for her. We've tried to support her, but some limitations remain. A few board members shifted in their seats. What we're seeing, my father continued, is an emotional reaction, likely caused by recent family events. This is not a corporate issue. Mr. Morgan, Edward Langford said sharply. You will have a chance to respond. Miss Morgan has the floor. My father sat back down, his face tight with anger. Charlotte looked at me and mouthed, You're embarrassing yourself. I looked at both of them and felt something inside me settle. Not anger, clarity. They weren't defending the company, they were defending the story they had told about me for years. I reached into my folder and held up the document. I won't be discussing my reading ability today, I said. I'll be discussing this. The room went silent. This is the last will and testament of Eleanor Morgan, founder of this company, notarized on September 12th, 2019. My father's face lost color. That's impossible, he said. My mother's will was executed years earlier. I have a copy. You have a copy of her previous will. I replied. A later valid will revokes the earlier one. I placed the document in front of Edward Langford. This one was signed 4 years later. Then I turned toward Daniel. Mr. Whitaker, would you confirm its authenticity? Daniel stood. I'm Daniel Whitaker, partner at Whitaker and Cole. I served as Eleanor Morgan's attorney until her death. I can confirm this will was executed in my presence, properly witnessed, notarized, and secured in escrow. Edward studied the pages, then looked up. This will transfers 51% of Morgan Holdings to Nicole Morgan. Murmurs spread around the table. Charlotte's voice cracked. That's a forgery. It is not. Daniel said immediately, and I would advise you not to make accusations without evidence. My father slammed his palm against the table. This is absurd. My mother was ill. She was being manipulated. I held his gaze. Manipulated. I pulled out my phone. Then maybe you can explain this. I pressed play, and my father's recorded voice filled the room. My father's recorded voice echoed through the room. She doesn't understand modern business. I propose reducing her voting rights to 10%. Then it stopped. Silence followed. My father's face tightened. That was a private discussion, he said. My grandmother was present. I replied calmly. She had every right to record it. Edward Langford set the document down, his expression sharpening. Miss Morgan, he said, please read the relevant section. I nodded. To my granddaughter, Nicole Morgan. I bequeath 51% of my shares in Morgan Holdings, with full voting rights. I paused briefly. This is done with full knowledge of my son Richard's treatment of Nicole. She has been excluded and denied opportunity. Not because she lacks ability, but because she lacked support. Charlotte shifted beside him, her composure slipping. Nicole is not incapable. She was abandoned. And I will not allow that to continue. I looked at my father. He confuses credentials with character. I read. He tried to strip me of power because I saw through him. He diminished Nicole because she reflects what he refuses to value. The final line came quietly. I built this company. I choose Nicole. When I finished, no one spoke. Edward turned to Daniel. You confirm this is valid? Yes, Daniel said. It supersedes the previous will. Edward nodded slowly. Then, as of this moment, Nicole Morgan holds 51% of Morgan Holdings. A murmur spread across the table. For the first time, my father didn't look at me with dismissal. He looked uncertain. That doesn't prove anything, Charlotte said quickly. Even if it's valid, Nicole has no experience leading a company. I'm not asking to lead it, I said. I'm asking you to look at the facts. I placed another document on the table. March 2018. My father proposed reducing my grandmother's voting rights from 51% to 10%. That was taken out of context. He snapped. The proposal failed. I continued. By 2 votes. Hers and Margaret Lawson's. I looked toward Margaret. She nodded. That's correct. She wasn't upset about the vote. She was upset that her own son tried to take control from her. This is irrelevant. My father said, "It's evidence." I replied, "Evidence that she knew exactly what she was doing when she wrote that will." The room fell quiet again. Edward looked around the table. "Does anyone have evidence that contradicts this?" No one answered. My father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Charlotte stared down at the table, her confidence gone. Finally, Thomas Green spoke. "We should recess. Let legal review everything." Edward nodded. 15 minutes. The room broke into quiet conversations as everyone stood. My father remained seated, staring at my grandmother's portrait on the wall. I followed his gaze for a moment, then looked away. The 15 minutes stretched longer as calls were made and documents verified. When everyone returned, the atmosphere had changed. Edward cleared his throat. "Our legal counsel has confirmed the will is valid under state law," he said. He looked at me. "Effective immediately. Nicole Morgan is the majority shareholder of Morgan Holdings." A quiet reaction moved through the room. He continued, "As majority shareholder, you now have the right to bring forward motions to this board." His eyes stayed on mine. "Miss Morgan, do you have a motion?" My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed steady. "I have one motion." My father immediately pushed back his chair. "Edward, this is sit down." "Richard." Edward Langford's voice cut through the room. Calm, but firm. "Miss Morgan has the floor." My father froze for a second, then slowly sat back down. The color had drained from his face. I looked around the table. 12 people who, until an hour ago, had never once considered me capable of anything. Now they were waiting. The decision was mine. I could feel it clearly. The power to end my father's career was sitting in my hands. For a brief moment, I thought about everything he had done, every word, every dismissal, every time I had been made to feel invisible. Then I thought about my grandmother, and I made my choice. I am not proposing to remove Richard Morgan as CEO. The tension in the room shifted instantly. Charlotte's head snapped toward me, confusion flashing across her face. Even Margaret looked slightly surprised. "What I am proposing," I continued, "is a vote of confidence." I met the eyes of each board member. "The board will decide whether Richard Morgan retains their confidence as CEO. If the majority votes no confidence, he resigns. If the majority votes confidence, I will not interfere with leadership." "That's ridiculous," Charlotte said, rising to her feet. "This is a spectacle, some kind of personal revenge." "No," I said calmly, meeting her gaze. "This is governance, the same process written into this company decades ago." I paused. "If he has your confidence, then he has nothing to worry about." Edward studied me for a moment. Something had changed in his expression. Not doubt, respect. "Is there a second?" he asked. "Seconded," Margaret said immediately. Edward nodded. "Then we vote. All in favor of confidence in Richard Morgan as CEO." 4 hands went up. His allies, people who had benefited from his leadership. All opposed. 7 hands rose. Edward counted carefully, then set his pen down. The motion carries. 7-4. With one abstention. He turned toward my father. Mr. Morgan, the board has voted no confidence. Per company bylaws. You have 30 days to submit your resignation. No one spoke. My father slowly stood, and then he looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in my life. I expected anger. Maybe even rage. But what I saw was something else. Understanding. The realization that he had underestimated me completely, and that it had cost him everything. Without saying a word, he turned and walked out. The room stayed silent for a few seconds before conversations began to rise again. I know what some people would think. Why didn't I just remove him immediately? Why give him any control at all? Because revenge isn't the same as justice. Destroying someone doesn't undo what they did to you. And my grandmother hadn't raised me to be cruel. She had raised me to be fair. After the boardroom cleared, I stepped into the hallway. I didn't get far. Nicole, my father's voice stopped me. I turned. He was standing there. My mother beside him. Victoria's makeup was smudged, her expression shaken in a way I had never seen before. You, my father said, his voice tight, controlled. You planned this. Not here, my mother whispered, placing a hand on his arm. Please. She just humiliated us in front of the board. He continued. After everything we've done for her, I didn't move. I didn't destroy anything. I said, I told the truth. The truth. He laughed bitterly. Your grandmother was manipulated. That lawyer, she wrote that will. After you tried to take her power, I said. My voice steady. Because she saw exactly who you are. Silence fell between us. You didn't lose because of me. I continued. You lost because of what you did to her. My mother stepped forward, her voice softer. Nicole, we were trying to protect you. You've always struggled. We didn't want to put pressure on you. I shook my head slowly. You didn't protect me, I said. You erased me. Years of silence finally turned into words. Every holiday, every conversation, every moment you praised Charlotte and pretended I wasn't there. My voice didn't shake. That wasn't protection. That was abandonment. That's not fair, she whispered. You're right, I said quietly. It wasn't. I met her eyes. I spent my whole life trying to prove I was worthy of this family. I took a breath. I'm done proving. My father stepped closer, grabbing my arm. This isn't over, he said. We'll challenge that will. I pulled my arm free. You'll lose, I said. And you know it. I turned toward the elevator. Behind me. I heard my mother call my name. I didn't stop. For the first time in my life, I didn't need their permission to walk away. The elevator doors closed, shutting them out. I leaned back against the cold metal wall as the adrenaline finally faded. What I felt wasn't victory. It wasn't satisfaction. It was something else entirely. Grief. In that moment, I realized something I had been avoiding for years. I had just let go of 28 years of hoping things would change. For so long, I believed that if I was patient enough, quiet enough, good enough, my parents would eventually see me, that one day. They would love me the way they loved Charlotte. That hope was gone now. and I was the one who had ended it. The elevator moved steadily downward, floor after floor, carrying me away from everything I had known. By the time it reached the lobby, I had wiped my eyes and straightened the oversized blazer I was wearing. I wasn't going to walk out looking broken. Daniel Whitaker was waiting near the security desk. That was... He paused, searching for the right word. Remarkable. It was necessary, I said. He nodded slowly. Your grandmother would agree? We walked toward the exit together. What happens now? He asked. I thought about it for a moment. Now I go home, I said. I sleep. And then I figure out what my life looks like without the family I thought I had, and without the role they forced me into. He glanced at me. You don't want to be CEO. I shook my head. I never did. We stopped near the revolving doors. I just want the company my grandmother built to be run by people who actually care about it, I said. Not people who treat it like something they're entitled to. Daniel considered that, then gave a small nod. The board will want to meet with you soon, he said. They'll want to discuss next steps. Your role, the transition. I know, I replied, but not today. I pushed the door open and stepped outside. The sunlight hit my face, warm and bright, almost overwhelming after everything that had just happened, for the first time in a long time. I wasn't someone's daughter. I wasn't a mistake. I wasn't a disappointment. I was just me, and that was enough. I turned back briefly, looking up at Morgan Tower, 42 floors of glass and steel, carrying my family's name. Tomorrow, I whispered to myself, I start something new. The next day, everything changed again. On May 19th, at exactly 4 p.m., my father signed his resignation letter. I wasn't there. I found out through an email. Miss Morgan, your father has formally submitted his resignation. Effective June 15th, the board has appointed Edward Langford as interim CEO while a permanent replacement is considered. Additionally, the board would like to offer you a position as strategic advisor. This would allow you to participate in major decisions while you determine your long-term involvement with the company. Please let us know your thoughts. Regards, Edward Langford. I read the message 3 times. Old habit? Then I forwarded it to Daniel. His reply came less than an hour later. Fair offer. No hidden conditions. Congratulations, Nicole. That evening, a company-wide announcement was sent out. Effective June 15th, Richard Morgan will step down as CEO of Morgan Holdings. Edward Langford will serve as interim CEO. The board also welcomes Nicole Morgan as strategic advisor in her capacity as majority shareholder. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The name they had once ignored was now at the top, and for the first time, it felt like it actually belonged there. We thank Richard Morgan for his years of service and wish him well in his future endeavors. That was how the company announcement ended. A clean sentence to close a complicated story. My phone didn't stay quiet for long after that. Messages started pouring in. People I had worked beside for 2 years. People who had never bothered to learn my name suddenly wanted to meet for coffee, to reconnect, to congratulate me. I ignored most of them, but one message made me stop. It was from Patricia Reyes, a senior executive assistant who had been with Morgan Holdings since the late 1980s. She had worked closely with my grandmother for years. Nicole, your grandmother used to talk about you all the time. She said you saw things others missed. I didn't understand what she meant back then. I do now. Welcome to the boardroom. She would be proud of you. I read it twice. Then I saved it. Because sometimes validation doesn't come from family. And sometimes that's enough. A week later, the story went public. Chicago Business Review ran the headline, Morgan Holdings Shakeup. Founder's granddaughter takes control after hidden will surfaces. They didn't use my name. Legal reasons. But anyone who mattered knew exactly who the article was about. The piece described it as a sudden shift in leadership, one that had been building quietly for years. It mentioned concerns about my father's management style and hinted that the change had been long overdue. The narrative had already started to shift. My parents canceled their appearance at a major charity gala that week. Their publicist cited health reasons. People believed it, or pretended to, behind the scenes. Things were different. 3 major investors requested meetings with me directly. Not with the board, not with the interim CEO, with me. The first 2 meetings lasted over an hour each. They asked questions. Careful, measured questions about the future of the company. At the end of both meetings, they chose to stay. We've had concerns for a while. One of them admitted, your grandmother built something rare. It's good to see it protected. Their words stayed with me. The ripple effect spread quickly. Social invitations my parents once received without question began to disappear. Events they used to headline suddenly had no space for them. The Morgan name, once enough to open any door, now came with hesitation. I didn't celebrate it, but I didn't grieve it either. That Saturday morning, Margaret Lawson called me. How are you holding up? She asked. I let out a quiet breath. I don't know yet. Ask me again in a few months. She laughed softly. Eleanor would have handled it exactly the same way, she said, especially the vote of confidence, giving him a chance he didn't deserve. I stayed quiet. She always believed mercy was power, Margaret added, after the call ended. I thought about that for a long time. Mercy wasn't weakness. It was choice. And for the first time in my life, the choice had been mine. 3 weeks passed. On June 8th, at exactly 2 p.m., my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but when I saw the name, I did. Nicole. My mother's voice sounded different, smaller, fragile in a way I had never heard before. Can we talk? She asked. Just us. I hesitated for a moment, then agreed. We met at a small coffee shop downtown. Neutral ground. No boardrooms, no offices, no audience. When I arrived, she was already there. For a second. I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, tired, the kind of tired that makeup couldn't hide. Thank you for coming, she said quietly, wrapping her hands around a cup she hadn't touched. I sat across from her. What do you want? Mom, she swallowed. To apologize, she said. The word sounded unfamiliar coming from her. For everything. Her voice cracked slightly at the end, and for the first time in a long time. I didn't know what to say. For the way we treated you, I asked quietly. For the things you said, or for the things you didn't say. She looked down at her hands. Are you apologizing because you're truly sorry, or because everything has changed? She flinched. The silence between us stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Both, she finally said, her voice trembling. I'm ashamed to admit it, but both. Her eyes filled with tears. I was so focused on Charlotte. She continued, on her success, on appearances, on what people expected from us. I told myself we were protecting you from pressure you couldn't handle. She shook her head slightly. But that wasn't true. I told myself that so I wouldn't have to feel guilty. I watched her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the mother I had grown up with. You let him call me worthless, I said. In front of family? In front of business partners? My voice stayed calm. You never said a word. I know, she whispered. A tear slipped down her cheek. I know, and I can't take any of it back. But Nicole, I don't want to lose you completely. Her voice broke. I don't even know if that's possible anymore, but I had to try. I looked at her for a long moment. This was the woman who had once braided my hair before school. The same woman who had later forgotten my birthday without even noticing. I can't pretend the last 20 years didn't happen, I said slowly. She nodded, unable to speak. But I'm willing to try. I added, not to go back, but to build something new, something honest. Her shoulders shook slightly as she exhaled. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. And for now, it was enough. 2 months passed. In August. My phone rang while I was walking through Grant Park. I almost ignored it, but when I saw Charlotte's name, I answered. Nicole. She said. Her voice sounded different, quieter. I know I don't have the right to ask, but can we meet? There was a pause. There's something I need to say. We met later that day, sitting on a bench near the fountain. The summer heat pressed down around us, heavy and still. Charlotte looked different. The perfection she had carried her entire life seemed to have cracked, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back carelessly, no polished image, no performance. I've been in therapy, she said without hesitation. Since May, 3 times a week. I nodded. That's good. She gave a short, humorless laugh. It's exhausting, she said. Turns out being the perfect one isn't really a gift. She looked down at her hands. It's a different kind of prison. I didn't interrupt. Dad expected perfection. She continued. Every grade, every award, every achievement. It was never enough. It was just the starting point for the next expectation. Her voice softened. And the way they treated you. I told myself that's just how things were. That you were different. She shook her head. I told myself I was protecting you by staying quiet. You weren't protecting me, I said. No, she admitted. I was protecting myself. Because if I spoke up, I would have been next. She finally looked at me. That's not an excuse, she said. It's just the truth. The honesty in her voice felt unfamiliar. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing, she said immediately. I don't deserve anything. Her voice cracked slightly. I just needed you to know. I see you now. She held my gaze. Really see you. The words settled between us. For the first time in our lives. There were no roles to play, no expectations. Just two people who had grown up in the same house. Finally speaking honestly. I looked at her for a moment. I can't go back, I said. She nodded. I know, but I don't want to stay like this either. I continued. Maybe. We start over. Her eyes filled with tears. From the beginning, she asked softly. From the truth. I said. It wasn't the relationship I had once wished for, but it was real, and for the first time. That felt like enough. I really see you, she said softly, and I'm sorry I didn't look sooner. We sat in silence, two sisters raised in the same house, yet strangers for most of our lives. I can't go back, I said, but I don't want us to stay like this either. Maybe we start over. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. I'd like that. It wasn't the relationship I once dreamed of, but it could become something real. 6 months later, everything had changed. In November 2024, I moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn Heights. From my window, I could see the bridge my grandmother once crossed on her way to her first office. For the first time, I could afford a place of my own. At Morgan Holdings, I stepped into a role I created myself. Director of Sustainable Development, a new division focused on green building, long-term impact, and responsible growth. It felt like something she would have believed in. The salary was more than I had ever earned, along with dividends from my shares. But what mattered was this. I was finally building something that felt like mine. My father called once a month, short conversations, careful words. We spoke about simple things and avoided everything that mattered. It wasn't healing, but it was something we could manage. My mother and I met for lunch every couple of weeks. At first, it was awkward, but slowly, she began to listen more, to understand instead of assume. It wasn't the relationship I once wanted, but it was honest. Charlotte and I met for coffee on weekends. No pretending anymore. She spoke about the pressure of being perfect. I spoke about the loneliness of being invisible. We didn't rewrite the past, but we stopped letting it control us. We were building something new. In my apartment, I hung my grandmother's portrait. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, it felt like she was still there. You gave me everything I needed, I whispered once. I just had to be brave enough to use it. 6 months ago, I was invisible. Now, I finally felt like myself. Looking back, I understand something I couldn't before. My grandmother didn't choose me because I was better than Charlotte. She chose me because I understood what it felt like to be overlooked, and still chose kindness, because I would never build something that made others feel the way I once did. Because leadership isn't about being the loudest voice, it's about seeing what others miss and choosing to act. And now, I finally see that in myself. She didn't leave everything to me because I was the smartest. She left it to me because she knew I wouldn't let power change me the way it changed my father. For years, I thought my dyslexia was my weakness, the reason I was always behind, always overlooked. But it wasn't. It was part of how I saw the world. The same mind that struggled with words could remember patterns, connections, details others missed. The same patience I was forced to develop became my strength. The same difference they used to dismiss me helped me see the truth when everyone else chose not to. My father measured worth through titles, degrees, performance. My grandmother measured it differently, through character, through kindness, through how you treat people who can't fight back. And now, for the first time in my life, I get to decide how I measure myself. not by my parents' expectations, not by my sister's achievements, not by anyone else's opinion, but by my own standards, my own truth. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, if you've ever been the one people ignored, underestimated, or wrote off too quickly, I want you to hear this. You don't need a hidden inheritance to prove your value, but you do need to stop chasing approval from people who were never willing to give it. That was the hardest lesson for me. Letting go of the idea that one day they would finally understand. Boundaries aren't walls, they're choices. They let you decide who gets to be part of your life and how. My family hurt me for years, but I didn't need to hurt them back to find peace. I just needed to stop waiting for them to see me and start seeing myself. That's what my grandmother really gave me. Not money, not power, but clarity. And no one can ever take that away. If you would choose what I chose, walking away from the need for approval, setting boundaries, and finally choosing yourself, then write yes. So I know I wasn't alone. If you would have done the opposite, stayed silent and kept chasing their acceptance, write silent. And if you're still unsure, still thinking it through, just write time. That was my story. And if you've ever lived something similar, I'd truly love to hear yours. There was a moment when I realized I had spent my entire life trying to earn love that was never freely given. And in that moment, everything changed. This story taught me that our value is not defined by how others see us, but by how we choose to see ourselves. I learned that being overlooked doesn't make you less. It often means you're quietly building a strength others don't understand. Real growth begins the day you stop asking for permission to exist and start giving yourself the respect you've always deserved. What matters most isn't proving people wrong, but finally choosing yourself without guilt. If my journey resonates with you, then you're not alone, and your voice matters more than you think. Share your thoughts, your story, because someone out there might need to hear it. If you believe in stories that inspire courage and self-worth, consider subscribing, leaving a comment, and sharing this with someone who needs it today. Together, we can build a community where everyone feels seen and valued. See you in the next story.
Welcome to Family Confessions. Our stories go beyond entertainment, helping viewers recognize toxic behaviors, understand boundaries, and reflect on their relationships, while reinforcing self-worth and the strength to heal and move forward. Each video follows a structured workflow ensuring quality and value for our audience. Thank you for being here.